Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. My name is David Zapka, and what we're going to be covering here this morning is the access control and event logging features in SDS 2015. If you do have any questions that come up as we go along here, please go ahead and type them in the questions pane on your GoToWebinar toolbar, and I will get to those after we're done with the presentation here. If you do have any other things that come up that are not related to this topic as we go, please email your support rep or give us a call here, and we can answer any questions that are not related to today's topic. So we're going to start off first here with the access control portion of this webinar, and I just want to first start off by mentioning that you do not have to use the access control features in SDS 2015. If you don't touch it, don't mess with it, it's not really going to apply, and SDS2 is going to work just as it always has. So if you're not concerned with limiting access for certain users or different offices that might be working on your same model, if you're not concerned with that, don't use it, don't have to. So, okay. With that being said, let's take a look, just kind of a little bit of a quick overview of access control. So basically it just allows a project administrator or administrators to limit the stations and functions that users have access to. It is project specific, so you can set, maybe if you got a couple different detailers in the office, but each one has their own project they're working on, and you don't want one in the other's project, you can set this up on a job-to-job basis on who can access which job and the things that they'll be able to do within there. There is a feature within there to completely lock a project down so that no one can access it. Maybe you're going to do that when you're finished up with a job and absolutely don't want any changes made to it. We'll be able to, with this access control, set up different groups with a subset of users to be created, and then what you do with that is you can limit the permissions of that particular group and the users within that group. So it basically works in kind of a hierarchy of who can access what here, and we'll kind of see that as we go along here with the presentation, just kind of giving you a quick overview of how this works here now. So continued with that, there's kind of different parts to the access control. There's a project administrator, there's going to be group administrators, and then there's going to be users that can be a part of whatever group that you wish them to be a part of. So we'll start off by talking about the project administrator. Project administrator is the top of the chain here. They'll have access to everything in here, and they'll be kind of the governing person here that sets the access of different users and different groups. Okay, so the first time that we actually open access control on a project, it's going to ask us for a access control block password, and we kind of have that in there as just a additional safeguard so that anybody in the office doesn't go in here and just start messing with it and screw things up. So to get that password for the very first time, contact your support rep here at Design Data, and we'll let you know what that default password is. Once you get that in there, you can go into your user options under the Site tab and change that. Something else to note about that is the access control block password is inherited in a job when the job is actually created. So this means that you could actually have different access control block passwords depending on when the job was created and when you may have changed that password. So keep that in mind. Like I said, project administrator can create and modify all groups and users. They're the top of the food chain. They can lock the project so no one can access it. And if you have set up access control and you wish to just clear that out of a project, you don't need that anymore for whatever reason, just deleting that administrator will reset the access control, and we'll see that as we go here as well. So I'm going to hop into SDS2 and kind of show you those things a little bit that I'm talking about. So first off, where do we get to access control? Well, that's going to be under utility functions. And right-hand side up towards the top, we have access control permissions. So this is the first time I'm hitting this on this project. It asks me for the access control block password. And like I said, contact your support rep to find out what that is for the first time. You can see it's fairly long there right now. When I type that in, hit OK, then it brings me up this window here. I'm not going to change anything, not going to set anything up in here yet. I want to show you where you can change that access control block password first. So you could see actually when I hit that, there is a change password button here, and I can go in there and change that password here. Otherwise, that is set in your user options. And if I go to the Site tab, there's an option to set the password right here. So I'll type the previous password. And my new password is just going to be SDS2. However, like I said, the password, that particular password is inherited at the time that you create this project. So even now when I go into the access control permissions, I'm not using the new password of SDS2. If I do that, it's going to tell me it's incorrect. Okay, I'm still using the old one because this project inherited it when I created it. Okay. So now once I'm in access control, first thing I can do is I can go ahead and set up my project administrator. So to do that, I go ahead and pick the administrator on the left-hand side. And then we can see we have a login here. I like to just go ahead and leave that as administrator for the project administrator. And then I go ahead and type in a password for this project administrator. If I want to see that password as I type it, I can check the show box next to that, and I am going to check that so that as I go along here, you guys can see what my password is a little bit, and I'm being a little bit more transparent for you there so you understand what I'm doing. Okay, so I've set up a project administrator. Now, what's going to happen next time when I click OK here, now when I go back into access control permissions, it's no longer going to ask me for that block password. I now have an administrator set up, so it's going to ask me for which user, and the user is either my project administrator, or as we go a little bit farther along here, I'll be able to select my group administrator to log in. So remember, I used the password admin, and I can get back in there now. Okay. Now, once that's done, I can go, depending on how I need this set up, I can do a couple different things. One, I could create different groups, or I could also create users. So users, going back to my PowerPoint here to give you some main points, simply at the top there, there's a add user button. There's going to be an add group button as well. And then the users that you can set up are going to be based on what is in the UID file in the SDS2 data directory. So this is also the files that store your nodes, and everything is based off of your Windows login name. Or if there are other usernames in there that you need to use but they haven't ran SDS2 yet and it's not populated in that UID file yet, you can manually type those in there as well. Some different options here. Full permission gives the users all permissions of that particular group. Or we can turn off full permission and then pick and choose which stations or functions we want to limit the user's access to. And then you can just simply disable a user to kind of delete it without deleting it, and you can re-enable it later to get it back if needed. Okay, so let's take a look at the user and setting up a user. So all I'm going to do to set up a user is up here, looks like the sheet of paper, I'm going to add a user. Now the login here says new user. If I pull that list down, this is my personal desktop computer, so I'm really the only one that runs SDS2 on it. So I just have the one username in there. Or, like I said, if I needed a different login name in there that wasn't there, I could type that in there, and that would work as well. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to set my user, and again, disable user. Notice password is grayed out. The reason that's grayed out is because, like I said, when you run SDS2, it looks to the Windows login to figure out who's running the computer, and then that's what it bases that off of and determines what to do. I have a full permission checkbox here, so that basically means this user has full permission to do whatever they want. Now, if I want to limit that, I go ahead and uncheck that, and I get all my options down here at the bottom. And so let's go ahead and say I don't care what stations David runs. However, I want to limit him from accessing job and fab setup. Maybe I don't want him to create a new fab. I don't want him getting in utility functions, copying job and fab setup. Maybe I really only want to allow him to get in and do the modeling stuff and the drawing editor stuff, but stay away from my setup. Okay. So what that means now is, as soon as I hit OK here, I'm going to hit OK to utility functions. Now, since I turned those things off, if I try to go to job or fabricator options, going to tell me that access control does not allow me to do that. Or same thing with utility functions here. Okay. So now I want to go back in there and show you guys more things to do with access control. However, as I'm going here, it's saying that David is the user and it's not allowing me to get in there. So how do I get to that now if I can't get to utility functions? Well, if we look at our start menu, I'm running Windows 8, so I'm going to have to come over here, and I just started typing 2015, and I have in my start menu a SDS2 access control permissions. I can go ahead and hit that, and it's going to bring up the login for me there. So I can get to this through the start menu instead of having to go through utility functions as well. Okay. And all this is set up again. So now I'm going to go ahead and let's limit this a little bit different way just to kind of show you. Maybe I only want David to access the modeling station. Okay, so I'll go ahead and turn everything else off. Hit OK here. I'm going to close that again. Go to my 2015, and when I try to start the full detailing station, again, tells me this project's access control permissions do not allow this user in the station. I said this is job specific, so I could hit change job here, go to a different job, and I could open that. Okay. I'm going to try and go back to my original one, and again, going to tell me the same thing. I can hit permissions here. Otherwise, I'm going to exit and do that one more time, and I limited myself to just the modeling station, I believe it was. And for some reason, the modeling station is not coming up. There we go. Okay, now I can get into that modeling station just fine. And again, can't get into my utility function, so I'm going to go ahead and go back here and grab access control permissions from my start menu. And now I'm back in here. Okay, so that's kind of setting up a user and limiting a user. Now, if I wanted to make this user a part of a different group, first thing I could do is go ahead and set up a group, and then I can limit the group permissions the same way I did for a user. So first off, the description of my group is up here, and let's say I'm going to go ahead and call this one Detailers. And my administrator, I'm going to go ahead and call this Detailer Administrator. and the password I'm just going to make detailer. Okay, so then right now this entire group has full permissions because that box is checked on for this group. If I uncheck that and make any changes here, it's going to limit then the users that are underneath of this group. So if I put a new user under that group, specified it here, notice that this user is limited to what was checked on for that particular group. So you can see in the tree there how it's a hierarchy of permissions, and anything underneath of the next highest one can't have higher permissions. Go back here to my PowerPoint slide to talk about groups a little bit. I already kind of added a group there. Talk about the description. Maybe you're going to create a description to describe the group. The allow group permissions for any user not listed. There's an option for that. We'll talk about that here in a second. But basically that allows you to set up permissions for users without having to create each individual one in that list there. You can copy permissions from other groups or users to inherit those permissions, and then the turning off full permissions works essentially the same way it did for our users. So I have that group in there, and what I want to do is I want to basically just say I want any user not listed to inherit the permissions of that group. So I'm going to delete my user here, so I've selected it in the list, hit the trash can up top. Now we don't actually have any users in there, but if I check the option here, allow group permissions for any user not listed, then when this is the active group, only the users can only access what I'm limiting them to here. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Right now it says I can only run the modeling station, and let's just uncheck job and fab setup. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and so this project's access control permission does not allow the user to continue in the station. That's fine. So then I can go ahead and go back. I'd have to start my modeling station. Now you notice when I come back in here to log in, I have two different administrators. I had the detailer administrator, and then administrator was just my top project administrator. So you can see there how the when I have this option checked, any user not listed inherits those permissions. Okay, so let's talk about, so we looked at the different parts of this. Let's talk about an actual workflow of how this is going to work. So a workflow, first thing is project administrator is going to come in here, enter that access control block password for the first time. They're going to put a password in for themselves, the project administrator. Then they're either going to go probably one of two directions. They can create users underneath of that project administrator, or they can create a new group, maybe for the current site underneath of there, and then they could set the permissions for the individual users or just that group. Then maybe they're going to create groups for different off-site locations, and for your off-site locations, you probably don't know all the usernames there that are going to be using it, and that's when you're probably going to turn on that option to allow any user not listed to inherit the group permissions. Okay, so now once that's all done, you go in, model your model, clean up your drawings, do whatever you got to do. Now you're going to go ahead and probably send that off to another office, whether that's through an FTP site or email or however you have that set up to transfer your projects. The suggestion before sending it off is to actually lock that project completely down before sending it to another office. The reason for that is to force the group administrator that you set up for the offsite location to log in their administrator and the access control to unlock the project, and that sets the current group, which in turn will set any user not listed to have only that group permission. Okay, so let's kind of take a look at that here a little bit. So I came in here, I have a project administrator set up, I have a detailers group set up, and maybe my detailers have full permission. But then I'm going to go ahead and set up another group here. I'll set up an approval group and maybe a fabricator group. And the groups could be within inside other groups, so I could create them under the detailers, but I'm going to go ahead and just set them up here underneath of the project administrator. So this one will be approval, and we'll call this one the approval administrator. Password, I'm going to make approval. Okay, so since this is going off for approval to my approvers, I'm going to go ahead and limit that. So I don't want that to have full permission, and I only want to limit this to being able to run the approval station. Now, all these other functions are selected here in this particular case, but if I'm limiting them to the approval station, a lot of these things can't be done in the approval station anyway, so I don't always necessarily need to worry about this, but I do have to be aware of it and that sort of thing. So, so approval group is limited to the approval station, and maybe I'm going to go ahead and set up another one here, and I'll call it fabricator, and we'll call this the fabricator administrator, and password, I'm going to use fabricator as well. Again, I want to limit that, so I uncheck full permissions, and I want to limit it to the fabricating station. Okay, so I got that all set up, and the other thing I missed here is I want to go ahead and uncheck, or excuse me, I want to turn on allow group permissions for any user not listed. That way I don't have to set up each individual user for each of the different sites, because that could be a big hassle. I may not know that information anyway. Okay, so I'll go ahead and hit OK here. And now I already got a model set up. Let's say I'm ready to send it off. So what I want to do is, before I send this off, I'm going to go back into my access control permissions. I'm going to log in as my project administrator. I'm going to go ahead and lock the project just by using the lock project checkbox up top. Now what this does is anyone who tries to access modeling or anything, it's not going to allow them to do anything with that. If I tried to go in and do the project transfer, not going to let me do that either. So I lock the project. Now I just need to change into a different job, and then I can go ahead and use my project transfer. I'm going to pack this project up. So it's the access control event logging job there. Directory, I'm going to go into a mapped drive here. So I'll go into just that mapped drive there, and packed file name. I want this to be access control _ event logging, and the packed job name there. Maybe I'll put the date behind it here. So let's go 02/03/2015. And then I'm going to go ahead and pack that up. So it's zipping that up. Now I could go ahead and close this. And I'm going to go ahead and go back, and now I'm in a different machine. I'm logged in as an approver, so if I go to my start menu, approval is the username that's logged in here. We can see that. I'm going to run the approval station. I'm going to go to project transfer, and I'm going to grab that particular project I used that I just zipped. Okay, there it is right there. Open that. It's going to go to my default repository. Notice the job name that it's using. I'm going to unpack that. Okay. Now I can go ahead and hit change project. I'm going to grab that particular job, and then I'm going to be forced to go into the permissions. And me as the project administrator, I would have communicated this to my approval administrator that you need to use the approval administrator user and tell them what their password is going to be. Now when I log in here, notice I can only see the approval group. I can't see anything above that because I don't have access to that. Okay, remember it works in a hierarchy. So then I can go ahead and unlock that project. Notice I can't change anything else here because it was limited by the project administrator. Okay, now I'm the approver. I can go into my approval station and I can make changes as I need to here. Okay, so that's kind of a workflow that I would use to use that access control. So remember, again, you don't have to use the access control if it's not something that's going to benefit you. If you don't want to use that, just leave it alone and won't do anything. Now, one thing you may want to think about is, not just allowing anybody to go into that access control and setting that up. So if I'm the detailing manager of the office, I may actually want to go in there and change that access control block password immediately to something that only I know, and then that would limit them from getting in there and accidentally, setting permissions on jobs and screwing things up. So you may want to, like I said, go change that block password right away. So I'm going to go back into access control permissions here. Now remember, I'm back to where my other machine where I could access everything here as the admin. And I want to just I want to unlock my project, and I want to clear all the permissions that I had set up here so we can hop over into the event logging portion of this. So if I just pick project administrator up top and I hit the trash can, that clears all of it out. So access control is essentially gone now. So if I go back in there, access control, again, it's asking me for the access control block password that it originally was because I cleared everything out. Okay. So that's our access control. Next thing we'll look at here is event logging. So STS2 in previous versions did have some capabilities with logging certain events, but basically we just took and we've expanded on the events that happen, and we've given a better viewer and a way to export this log information a little easier. So first thing I want to show you is in Jobber Fabricator Options under Event Logging. It's in the middle column down towards the bottom. Okay, this is where we're going to set up what items we want to be logged. So you can see this is quite a bit bigger list than what we've had in the past. If you're curious on what actual events get logged with each one of these different operations, go to the Help menu from this window. You can go ahead and click on that, any one of those, and it's going to take you to a table that describes what events are actually logged for each one of these options. So go to your Help menu to find out exactly what is logged. Okay. I think I had an extra window open in the background there. Okay, so when I created this job, I had all these options turned on. So let me go in and go into, let's say, my job properties, and under my log tab, notice I have all these different events for my erection views when I created them. Will always log when a job is created. We have some different options in here, or events, I should say, about the access control that I was messing around with there and showing you guys. So that's in my job properties, remember, under the log tab. If I hop into modeling, I can go ahead and show you in modeling some of the different items that are logged for my members. Okay, so if I go ahead and edit one of these members, go into the properties here and go under the log tab, I can see different items or different events that were happening when it was added, it was processed, assigned a piece mark, I detailed it, and then I changed the piece mark. And you'll also notice here it always lists the user that did that, the date, the time that event happened. So. Okay, now if I want to view or I'm looking for specific users that may have made some changes, back in utility functions, right-hand side, I have a view event log. And this is going to bring up a window for me to load different information. So the first thing I'd want to do when I come in here is turn on up top here what events that I want to see. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn everything on. Okay. And then at the bottom, I have several options or buttons down here. So I have apply, reload, save, and close. Since there's no information in here, I'm going to have to use the reload button. So what the reload button does is if you've selected an option up here that is going to add information to this window, I need to hit reload so that SDS2 goes and reads all the information and is able to put the appropriate information in there. Now, there is a lot of information that it's reading, so it can take a little bit of time depending on the size of the job. So this job isn't too terribly large, pretty small one compared to what a lot of you do, I'm sure. So went fairly quickly, but you know, on a real project, don't be surprised if it takes a couple minutes to load that information because there is a lot that it's going through. So now I see I get all this information in here. And now maybe I need to start narrowing this down. So maybe I only want to see certain items for the member. Maybe I only want to see when the piece mark was changed. So I can turn off all these other things. And now, since I'm taking information away, I don't have to add information in here. I can just go ahead and hit this apply button, and it's going to be a lot quicker for it to narrow that information down and remove those other items that I turned off. I can also then limit this to, you know, maybe I want to only see certain member numbers in that list. And I'm going to narrow this down even further to only the member information. And my search options over here are used to kind of filter out a little bit. So I could check users, and then if I had multiple users working on this project, they're all going to be listed here, and I could pick which users I wanted to see. Or let's say I want to see only member number 1 through 10. I can go ahead and apply that. And now in this list, notice under my member number column, 1 through 10 should be all that's listed over there. So the events for that 1 through 10, you have a date range, a time range, or just a specific find option there that you can type certain string that you want to find. So fairly simple, fairly straightforward there. I'm going to go back into the model, and I don't really have any material or hole or bolt operations that have been logged yet, so I just want to go back into the model and kind of show you some of those. And I'm just going to go ahead and snap to the surface here of that beam, and let's say I go ahead and add bent plate pour stop on there. So I'll do my add material, bent plate, pick my 2 points, input my information. Okay. So now let's just go ahead and take a look at the log for that. Edit that, go to General Information and Properties, my log tab. I can see it tells me the material was added. Okay, let's take that a little bit further here. Maybe we need to cope this around my columns, so let's go ahead and just say I'm going to cope that, and we're going to do a 1/4 inch clearance. Okay, maybe we need to do the same thing over here. Cope that, okay. And then let's go ahead and say maybe we're going to bolt this to that beam. So let's go ahead and bolt this up. Add holes first. And I'll go ahead and do this. Maybe we want 2-foot spacing. Okay. So we got our holes in there now, and then I'm going to go ahead and match the holes. Add bolts. Yes. Okay, so now we got holes, bolts, everything added in there. Now if I go back and edit this material and go into the properties under my log tab, I can see all those different fit operations can be logged now. Tells me when holes are added, tells me when piece marks are changed. Again, remember I had all those options turned on in setup, so they'll only be logged if you have them turned on. I should be able to go to my bolt here and go to properties and look at the log tab. It'll tell me when the bolt was added, who added it, all that. Okay, so remember it's just logging information under that log tab. And I want to go back to the log viewer here now and show you a few other things with the log viewer. So remember that was in utility functions, view event log. And I'm going to turn everything on because I want everything loaded in here. Not going to narrow it down with my search options. I just turned everything on to be included. Remember, I'm adding information in here, so I have to hit the reload button. Okay, got all that in there. Now I want to save this off into just a basic text file, so I can hit the save button here and save file as. So go ahead and browse. I'll go to my desktop and SDS2 log. Okay, save that off. And if I look at my desktop here, now I have an SDS2 log.txt, and I can bring that up in just a basic text viewer then. WordPad, Notepad, Microsoft Word, whatever I choose there. Okay. The other thing I might want to do is maybe I want a comma delimited file here instead of just a huge thing, and maybe then I can get this into Excel more easily. Well, it's not necessarily an automatic function to get it into a comma delimited format, but the log viewer does just use a Python. It's just a Python script, so it's basically just a parametric that the log viewer runs from and creates that file. So if I look in my SDS2 2015B data directory under the macro folder, if I go into examples, there's an SDS2 logviewer.py file in here. I'm going to edit this with idle, and you should all have idle if you run SDS2. It should be installed on your computer. Now, to make it easy on you, I've already found the information that I need to modify here, and all I have to do is go to my edit pull down. I can go to line number 175, and this output line right here probably looks like Greek to most of you. But all we have to do here is add a comma where we need it. So in between each percent symbol, we need a comma. So I'll add one after this one and that one. Just going to go ahead and add a comma after each one of these. Last one I don't need to because I shouldn't need a comma there. I'll go ahead and save this. I'm going to close that. And now I'm going to close my log viewer and just relaunch it. I'll reload all my information again. Okay. Now let me go ahead and save this file. So the process hasn't changed at all. I just modified how this text file is created. So I'll call this one STS2 log, comma, delimited. Okay. And I sent that to my desktop. So now when I open this one, notice I get the commas now after each line in here. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and now maybe I want to open that in Excel and bring it into a Excel spreadsheet. Fairly easy. I can go to the Data tab up here, get external data from text, go to my desktop, grab my comma delimited file, choose delimited, specify my delimiter, it's a comma, and then notice this preview down at the bottom shows you where each break is going to be, should be where each comma is at. I can go ahead and specify for this column, that's going to be a date, and it is the year, month, day. Okay, finish that, specify which cell I want that input at, and now I have all that information in there. I could go through and put headers up here, and then what's nice about this also with Excel, you have the filter. So if I just go ahead and say I want a filter, basically gives me these pull downs at the top that allows me to filter out the information. So if I want to pull that down and I only want to see operations for the member, I could go ahead and do that. Notice then only what's in that column for member is specified for me. If I come over here to maybe the date or the time, maybe I want to sort that by the date or the time. So when I pull that down, I can say sort A to Z, sort Z to A should go backwards. I could do the same with the date, oldest to newest, newest to oldest, or I can uncheck the different options here. So maybe I only want to see everything that happened on February 3rd. I can uncheck the 2 there, and now only the dates of 2-3 should be shown in there. So just showing you a way to get it into Excel and maybe use Excel to your advantage, because I do realize that this log viewer isn't the greatest. It works for your basic things that you need to do, but getting it into Excel and using it in Excel can help speed up your process and give you a little extra functionality there if you need it. So. This concludes here what I have today to show you on access control and event logging.